I'm Maya, 29 years old, and right now, I'm sitting in my small apartment in downtown Atlanta, staring at a termination letter. It's been 3 weeks since I was fired from Sterling Innovations, a marketing firm I poured my heart into for 5 years. The silence in this room is deafening, a stark contrast to the bustling office I once called my second home. My career was everything to me. I started as an eager intern, fresh out of college, dreaming of making a real impact in the advertising world. I believed in the power of authentic connection, of telling stories that resonated with everyone, regardless of their background. That belief was my guiding star, even when the corporate ladder felt steep. Sterling Innovations, on the surface, seemed like the perfect place for that vision. They boasted about their diversity initiatives, their inclusive campaigns, and their commitment to social responsibility. I bought into it, hook, line, and sinker, dedicating long hours and sacrificing personal time to climb the ranks. My boss, Mr. Harrison, was the charismatic face of the company's success. He was charming, articulate, and seemed to embody the progressive values Sterling claimed to uphold. He had a way of making you feel seen, valued, and part of something bigger, which made his eventual request all the more jarring. Looking back, there were subtle cracks in the facade, whispers in the hallways, and unspoken tensions that I, in my youthful optimism, chose to overlook. I was so focused on my work, on proving myself, that I dismissed them as typical office politics, not recognizing the insidious undercurrents. I remember the day I got my promotion to senior marketing manager. It felt like the culmination of years of hard work, a validation of my talent and dedication. Mr. Harrison personally congratulated me, emphasizing how much faith he had in my judgment and my ability to lead. That promotion also came with increased responsibilities, including managing key client accounts and spearheading major campaigns. It meant more direct interaction with Mr. Harrison, more late-night strategy sessions, and a deeper dive into the company's core decision-making processes. I was thrilled, genuinely believing I was on the right path, contributing to a company that aligned with my personal ethics. I envisioned crafting campaigns that celebrated diversity, that brought people together, and that truly reflected the vibrant tapestry of our society. My parents, who had always instilled in me the importance of integrity and standing up for what is right, were incredibly proud. They reminded me that true success wasn't just about money or status, but about living a life of purpose and making a positive difference. Their words echoed in my mind as I walked into the office each morning, ready to tackle new challenges. I felt a sense of purpose, a drive to excel not just for myself, but to honor the values they had instilled in me, values that felt increasingly challenged. The office itself was a sleek, modern space, all glass and chrome, designed to project an image of innovation and forward thinking. It was a place where ideas were supposed to flourish, where creativity was encouraged, and where everyone was supposedly given a fair chance. My workstation was a hub of activity filled with mood boards, campaign sketches, and endless cups of coffee. I thrived in that environment, surrounded by the energy of my colleagues, all working towards common goals, or so I thought. There was a particular project, a major national campaign for a new beverage brand, that had everyone buzzing. It was a huge opportunity for Sterling, and I was tasked with leading the creative direction, a role I embraced with enthusiasm. This campaign was meant to be groundbreaking, inclusive, and appeal to a broad demographic. I spent weeks researching, brainstorming, and developing concepts that I truly believed would resonate with consumers from all walks of life. I had no idea then that this exciting project would become the crucible, the very point where my professional aspirations would collide head-on with a moral dilemma that would change the trajectory of my life forever. The memory of that day still burns. Before the explicit request, there were subtle indicators, almost imperceptible at first, that something was amiss within Sterling Innovations. I started noticing a pattern in the client acquisition, a leaning towards certain demographics, while others seemed to be quietly overlooked or dismissed. It was never overt, just a feeling. During team meetings, when we discussed target audiences, Mr. Harrison would often steer the conversation away from minority groups, citing market saturation or niche appeal as reasons. His language was always professional, but the underlying message began to feel unsettling, a quiet exclusion. I remember one instance where I presented a concept featuring a diverse cast of models for a lifestyle brand. The feedback was lukewarm, with Mr. Harrison suggesting we refocus on the core demographic, a euphemism, I later realized, for a less diverse, more traditionally affluent audience. He would often praise my bold ideas, but then subtly undermine them, suggesting they might be too progressive for our current client base. It was a clever tactic, making me feel heard while simultaneously ensuring my more inclusive visions never saw the light of day. My colleagues, too, seemed to operate within an unspoken understanding. They rarely challenged Mr. Harrison's subtle directives, perhaps out of fear, or perhaps because they simply didn't recognize the underlying bias in his seemingly innocuous suggestions. I tried to push back gently, suggesting market research that supported broader representation, or proposing alternative strategies that included more diverse communities. My efforts were met with polite nods, then quietly shelved, left to gather dust in the digital archives. There was a particular client, a large retail chain, whose campaign I was managing. They had a history of promoting a very specific, almost monochromatic, image. I saw it as an opportunity to introduce more diversity, to make their brand truly reflective of modern America. I spent countless hours crafting a proposal that showcased how inclusive marketing could not only expand their customer base, but also enhance their brand reputation. I was passionate about it, believing it was a chance to do good while doing good business. When I presented it to Mr. Harrison, his smile was tight. He commended my enthusiasm, but then began to dissect the proposal, not on its strategic merits, but on its perceived risk to the client's established image. He used words like alienating and unnecessary. He suggested we stick to a tried-and-true approach, one that had historically excluded certain groups. It was a coded message, a clear directive without ever uttering the words "don't include people of color" or "avoid diverse representation." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It was the first time his veiled intentions felt so palpable, so undeniably present. The air in his office grew heavy with an unspoken truth, a truth I was beginning to confront head-on. I tried to argue, to present data, to appeal to the company's stated values of inclusivity. He listened patiently, then simply reiterated his position, his voice calm but firm, leaving no room for further discussion or dissent. That evening, I went home feeling a deep unease. The vibrant, inclusive campaigns I envisioned seemed to clash with the quiet, almost invisible barriers I was encountering. The optimism I once held for sterling innovations began to fray at the edges. I started observing more closely, listening to the nuances in conversations, watching the subtle interactions. It was like a veil was slowly lifting, revealing a different reality beneath the polished corporate exterior. The company's diversity initiatives, I realized, were largely performative, designed to look good on paper and in annual reports, but not truly integrated into the core business practices or decision-making. It was a bitter pill to swallow. This growing awareness made me question everything I thought I knew about sterling innovations and about Mr. Harrison. The man I admired, the company I believed in, were slowly revealing a darker, more troubling side. The stage was set, not for a groundbreaking campaign, but for a confrontation of values, a moment of truth that would force me to choose between my career and my conscience. I just didn't know how soon that moment would arrive. The request came on a Tuesday afternoon, a seemingly ordinary day that would forever be etched in my memory. Mr. Harrison called me into his spacious corner office, the one with panoramic views of the city skyline, a symbol of his power and influence. The air was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and unspoken expectations. He began by praising my work on the new beverage campaign, calling it exceptional and innovative. His words were a soothing balm, momentarily easing the growing unease I had felt. He spoke of the campaign's potential, the national reach, the significant revenue it could generate for the firm. Then his tone shifted. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper, as if sharing a secret. "Maya," he said, "we have a slight adjustment to make for the final phase of the campaign. It's a sensitive matter, but crucial for our client's comfort." He explained that the client, a long-standing and highly lucrative account, had expressed concerns about the broad appeal of the current campaign imagery. They felt it might alienate a specific segment of their traditional customer base, a segment he described vaguely as our core discerning consumers. As he spoke, he gestured towards the mood board I had created, specifically pointing to images featuring models of color and those from diverse cultural backgrounds. His eyes lingered on them, a subtle disapproval in his gaze that sent a chill down my spine. The client, he continued, prefers a more traditional aesthetic. They want the campaign to reflect a certain aspirational lifestyle, one that resonates more directly with their established demographic. We need to streamline the visuals. He then made it explicit. He wanted me to remove the diverse imagery and replace it with visuals predominantly featuring white models. He framed it as a strategic refinement, a necessary evil to secure the client's continued business and maintain Sterling's profitability. My mind reeled. This wasn't a subtle hint or a veiled suggestion. This was a direct, undeniable request for racial exclusion. It was a betrayal of everything I believed in, everything Sterling Innovations claimed to stand for, and everything I had worked towards. I felt a surge of nausea, a mix of shock and indignation. My voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Mr. Harrison, are you asking me to remove the diverse representation from the campaign because of the race of the models? The words hung heavy in the air. He sighed, a practiced, exasperated sound. Maya, don't be naive. This is business. We have to prioritize client satisfaction. It's not about race, it's about market segmentation. We're simply aligning the visuals with the client's brand identity. His eyes were cold. He tried to rationalize it, to dress it up in corporate jargon, but the ugly truth was laid bare. He was asking me to compromise my integrity, to participate in a discriminatory act, all for the sake of profit. It was a test, and I knew I couldn't fail it. I looked at the city sprawling beneath his window, a vibrant mosaic of cultures and people, and then back at his unyielding face. The contrast was stark, the hypocrisy sickening. I knew, with absolute certainty, what my answer had to be. I can't do that, Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice gaining strength. My work and my personal ethics are built on the principle of inclusivity. I cannot knowingly create content that excludes or marginalizes any group of people based on their race. His expression hardened, the charm vanishing instantly. Maya, this is not a request, it's a directive. Sterling Innovations operates on client-first principles. If you cannot fulfill this, then perhaps you are not suited for this level of responsibility. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air, but my resolve solidified. I had made my choice. The consequences, I knew, would be severe, but the alternative was to betray myself, and that was a price I was unwilling to pay. The silence that followed my refusal was deafening, punctuated only by the distant hum of city traffic outside Mr. Harrison's office. His face, usually a mask of practiced charm, contorted into a cold, unfamiliar expression. The air grew heavy with unspoken condemnation. "You're making a grave mistake, Maya," he said, his voice low and menacing. "This isn't a university debate. This is the real world, where decisions have consequences, and loyalty to the firm is paramount. You're jeopardizing a multi-million-dollar account." I stood my ground, my heart pounding, but my resolve unwavering. My loyalty is to the principles I believe in, Mr. Harrison. And those principles include treating all individuals with respect and dignity, which this request clearly violates. He leaned back in his chair, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Very well. If you are unwilling to adapt to the strategic needs of the company and its clients, then I'm afraid we have no choice but to part ways. Your employment with Sterling Innovations is terminated, effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I had anticipated them. Fired. Just like that. 5 years of dedication, of late nights and early mornings, reduced to a single, cold sentence. My professional world, as I knew it, crumbled around me. He instructed me to gather my personal belongings and leave the premises, escorted by security. There was no discussion, no negotiation, no severance package offered. Just a swift, brutal dismissal, designed to send a clear message to anyone who dared to defy him. Walking through the office for the last time, past the cubicles where my colleagues worked, felt surreal. I kept my head high, trying to project an air of composure, but inside, a storm of emotions raged. Anger, disbelief, profound sadness, and a gnawing sense of injustice. My colleagues looked up, some with curiosity, others with a flicker of understanding in their eyes. I wondered if they knew, if they suspected the true reason for my abrupt departure, or if they would simply accept the official narrative that would undoubtedly follow. Once outside, the bustling city felt alien, indifferent to the seismic shift that had just occurred in my life. I clutched my small box of belongings, the weight of it feeling heavier than any burden I had ever carried. The termination letter felt like a brand. I drove home in a daze, the familiar streets of Atlanta blurring through my tear-filled eyes. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, a place where I was forced to confront the harsh reality of unemployment and the crushing weight of a principled stand. The first few days were a blur of despair. I replayed the conversation with Mr. Harrison endlessly, second-guessing myself, wondering if there was anything I could have done differently, any way to navigate the situation without sacrificing my integrity. But each time the answer was the same: no. I couldn't have compromised. The request was too egregious, too fundamentally opposed to who I was. The cost of compliance would have been far greater than the loss of a job. The financial stress began to set in almost immediately. Rent, bills, student loans, the responsibilities that once felt manageable now loomed large, threatening to engulf me. The fear of an uncertain future was a constant, unwelcome companion. I felt isolated, cut off from the professional world I had known. The thought of explaining my termination to future employers, of trying to articulate the moral dilemma without sounding bitter or unreasonable, filled me with dread. But amidst the despair, a tiny spark of defiance flickered. I had stood up for what was right. I had refused to be complicit in an act of discrimination. That, I realized, was a victory, even if it came at an immense personal cost. This was not just about my job, it was about something much larger. It was about the insidious nature of systemic bias, about the courage it takes to challenge power, and about the profound impact of one person's choice. The days following my termination settled into a monotonous rhythm of quiet struggle. My apartment became both my sanctuary and my prison. I spent hours staring at my laptop, scrolling through job boards, each rejection email a fresh sting. The optimism that once defined me felt like a distant memory. I tried to reach out to former colleagues, but most of my calls went unanswered, or the conversations were brief and guarded. It became clear that Sterling Innovations had quickly spun a narrative portraying me as difficult or unprofessional, effectively isolating me. My professional network, which I had painstakingly built over years, seemed to evaporate overnight. The silence from people I once considered friends or mentors was almost as painful as the termination itself. It was a stark reminder of how quickly allegiances can shift in the corporate world. I started to doubt myself, to question my judgment. Was I too idealistic? Was I naive to think that ethics truly mattered in a cutthroat industry? The insidious whispers of self-blame began to creep into my thoughts, threatening to overwhelm me. Sleep became elusive. My nights were filled with restless tossing and turning, replaying the confrontation with Mr. Harrison, analyzing every word, every nuance. The weight of the injustice felt heavy on my chest, making it hard to breathe. My savings, which had once felt secure, began to dwindle rapidly. The anxiety about making rent, about covering basic expenses, became a constant companion. It was a stark reminder of the financial vulnerability that comes with unemployment. I considered reaching out to a lawyer, but the thought of a protracted legal battle against a powerful firm like Sterling Innovations, with their endless resources, felt daunting. The emotional and financial toll seemed too high to bear. Yet, amidst the despair, a flicker of resilience remained. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping with their marketing efforts for a food bank. It was a small act, but it reminded me of my skills and, more importantly, of my purpose. Working with the community, seeing the direct impact of my efforts, helped to slowly rebuild my confidence. It was a stark contrast to the corporate world, a place where genuine connection and social good often seem secondary to profit. I also began journaling, pouring out my frustrations, my fears, and my unwavering belief in the choice I had made. It was a therapeutic process, a way to process the trauma and reaffirm my commitment to my values. My parents were my rock during this period. They didn't offer platitudes. Instead, they offered unwavering support, reminding me that true character is revealed not in comfort, but in adversity. Their faith in me was a lifeline. "You did the right thing, Maya," my mother would say, her voice firm. "A job isn't worth sacrificing your soul. The truth has a way of finding its way out, even when people try to bury it." Her words were a quiet prophecy. I started spending more time in the city's public library, not just looking for job leads, but reading about social justice, about ethical leadership, and about individuals who had stood up against injustice, often at great personal cost. Their stories became a source of inspiration, reminding me that I was not alone in my struggle, that countless others had faced similar dilemmas and emerged stronger. It fueled a quiet determination within me. I knew that the path ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that I couldn't give up. The truth, I believed, had to come out, not just for my own vindication, but for the countless others who might face similar racist requests in the shadows of corporate power. The truth, as my mother had prophesied, found its way out, but not in the way I ever expected. It started subtly, with a cryptic message on an anonymous online forum dedicated to corporate ethics. Someone had posted a vague accusation about a major marketing firm suppressing diverse imagery. I stumbled upon the post by chance, my heart leaping into my throat as I recognized the thinly veiled references to Sterling Innovations and the beverage campaign. It was too specific to be a coincidence. Someone else knew. The forum post quickly gained traction, sparking a heated debate about corporate responsibility and performative diversity. While no names were mentioned, the details were enough to pique the interest of online journalists and social media activists. Then came the first leak, an internal memo, anonymously shared, discussing strategic adjustments to the beverage campaign's visual direction. It was carefully worded, but the underlying intent was clear to anyone familiar with corporate speak. It was a smoking gun, albeit a blurry one. The memo didn't mention my name, but it confirmed the existence of the racist request. The online community exploded. Hashtags like #corporate_racism and #SterlingSecrets began trending, putting immense pressure on the company. I watched from the sidelines, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through me. Fear of retaliation, but exhilaration that the truth, or at least a part of it, was finally seeing the light of day. The quiet struggle was about to become very loud. The major turning point came a few days later. An investigative journalist, known for her tenacious reporting on corporate misconduct, published an exposé. It detailed the internal memo, interviewed former employees who spoke anonymously about a culture of subtle bias, and hinted at a specific incident involving a senior manager. The article didn't name me directly, but it described a young, principled marketing professional who had been abruptly terminated after refusing a discriminatory directive. My phone began to ring, relentlessly, with calls from reporters. I was hesitant to speak publicly, still reeling from the personal cost of my stand. But the journalist, through a mutual contact, reached out to me directly, promising anonymity and emphasizing the importance of my testimony to expose the truth fully. After much deliberation and a long conversation with my parents, I decided to share my story, but on my terms. I would provide the journalist with the full details, the specifics of Mr. Harrison's request, and the precise timeline of my termination. The twist, however, was in how the information truly got out. It wasn't just the anonymous memo. It was Mr. Harrison's own assistant, a quiet, unassuming young woman named Chloe, who had witnessed the entire exchange in his office that day. Chloe, deeply disturbed by what she heard, had secretly recorded the conversation between Mr. Harrison and me on her phone. She had been too afraid to come forward immediately, but the online buzz and the journalist's article gave her the courage. She sent the recording, along with other incriminating internal communications, directly to the investigative journalist. It was the irrefutable proof, the undeniable evidence that validated every word of my story. The journalist, now armed with the recording, updated her article, directly quoting Mr. Harrison's racist request and detailing my refusal and subsequent firing. The anonymity I had initially sought was no longer possible, nor did I want it. The truth had not just leaked, it had burst forth like a dam breaking, propelled by the courage of an unexpected ally. Everything was about to change, not just for me, but for Sterling Innovations and for Mr. Harrison himself. The release of the recorded conversation sent shockwaves through the corporate world and beyond. The public outcry was immediate and fierce. Social media was ablaze with condemnation, and major news outlets picked up the story, turning Sterling Innovations into a symbol of corporate hypocrisy and systemic racism. Mr. Harrison, once the golden boy of the firm, became a pariah overnight, his carefully crafted image shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The company, initially attempting to issue a vague apology, was forced to confront the full extent of the scandal. Clients began to pull their accounts, citing reputational damage and a fundamental misalignment of values. The beverage brand, the very client Mr. Harrison had tried to protect with his racist request, was among the first to sever ties, issuing a strong statement condemning discrimination. Sterling Innovations' stock plummeted. Employees, both current and former, began to come forward with their own stories of subtle biases and discriminatory practices within the company, creating a cascade of negative publicity. The internal culture was exposed for what it truly was. Amidst the chaos, I found my voice. The fear that had gripped me for weeks began to dissipate, replaced by a fierce sense of purpose. I gave interviews, not with anger or bitterness, but with a calm, articulate resolve, sharing my experience and advocating for genuine inclusivity in the workplace. I spoke about the importance of integrity, about the courage it takes to stand up for what is right, and about the need for corporate accountability. My story resonated with countless individuals who had faced similar dilemmas in their own careers but felt powerless to speak out. The unexpected twist was the outpouring of support I received. Messages from strangers, from former colleagues I hadn't heard from in years, and from industry leaders flooded my inbox. They praised my courage, offered job opportunities, and expressed solidarity. Within days, Mr. Harrison was publicly fired from Sterling Innovations, his career in shambles. The company announced a full internal investigation, a restructuring of its leadership, and a genuine commitment to overhauling its diversity and inclusion policies. It was a complete capitulation. The CEO of Sterling Innovations issued a public apology, not just to me, but to the entire community, acknowledging the firm's failures and outlining concrete steps they would take to rectify the situation. It felt like a small victory, but a significant one. I was approached by several rival marketing firms, all eager to hire me, not just for my skills, but for my integrity and the positive public image I now embodied. It was a stark contrast to the isolation I had felt just weeks prior. I carefully considered my options, determined to choose a workplace that truly aligned with my values, a place where I could genuinely contribute to creating inclusive and equitable campaigns. I wasn't just looking for a job, I was looking for a mission. My story became a case study in business ethics, taught in universities and discussed in boardrooms. It highlighted the critical importance of ethical leadership and the devastating consequences of prioritizing profit over people. The experience transformed me. I emerged not just as a marketing professional, but as an advocate, a voice for those who had been silenced. The pain of the past was slowly being transmuted into purpose, into a powerful force for change. The journey was far from over, but the tide had turned. The truth had not only leaked, it had roared, dismantling a facade of corporate virtue and paving the way for a new chapter, not just for me, but for the industry itself. The dust settled, but the ripples of change continued to spread. I accepted a position as the head of inclusive marketing at a smaller, but highly reputable, agency known for its genuine commitment to social impact. It was a perfect fit, a place where my values were not just tolerated, but celebrated and actively integrated into every project. My new office, unlike the sterile grandeur of Sterling Innovations, felt vibrant and collaborative. It was filled with passionate individuals who shared my vision for ethical advertising, where creativity and conscience went hand in hand. I found a true sense of belonging. The surprising twist in my journey was the unexpected bond one formed with Chloe, Mr. Harrison's former assistant. She reached out to me, expressing her remorse for not speaking up sooner, but also her relief that the truth was finally out. She confessed to being the one who recorded the conversation. Chloe explained that she had been deeply troubled by Mr. Harrison's behavior for a long time, witnessing numerous instances of subtle discrimination. She had secretly started documenting his questionable directives, fearing she might need proof one day. Her courage was truly inspiring. I learned that Chloe, too, had faced consequences for her bravery. She had been fired from Sterling Innovations shortly after the recording went public, but she had no regrets. We became close friends, united by our shared experience and our commitment to justice. Together, we decided to channel our experiences into something positive. We co-founded a nonprofit initiative called Voices of Integrity, dedicated to providing legal and emotional support to employees who face discrimination or ethical dilemmas in the workplace. Voices of Integrity quickly gained traction, becoming a beacon of hope for countless individuals. We offered workshops on ethical decision-making, provided resources for documenting workplace misconduct, and connected people with pro bono legal assistance. My story, once a painful personal ordeal, transformed into a powerful platform. I began speaking at conferences, not just about marketing, but about the critical importance of corporate ethics, diversity, and the courage to stand up against injustice. I often shared Chloe's story too, highlighting the bravery of whistleblowers and the profound impact one individual can have. Her quiet act of recording had been the true catalyst, the surprising twist that brought down a powerful man and exposed a flawed system. My financial situation, once precarious, stabilized and then thrived. The new role allowed me to not only rebuild my savings but also to invest in causes I deeply believed in, including supporting minority-owned businesses and funding educational programs for underserved communities. I found a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper fulfillment than any corporate title or salary could ever provide. My life was no longer defined by the job I lost, but by the impact I was making, the change I was helping to create. The experience taught me that true power isn't in a title or a corner office, but in the unwavering commitment to one's values. It taught me that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person's refusal to compromise can ignite a revolution. My journey from being fired for denying a racist request to becoming an advocate for workplace integrity was a testament to resilience, to the power of truth, and to the surprising ways justice can prevail when people choose courage over comfort. I am Maya, and my story is a reminder that sometimes the end of one path is simply the beginning of a much more meaningful journey. The truth always finds a way, and when it does, everything truly changes.